I never thought I'd be standing here sharing this story with the world. It's the kind of thing you hear about happening to other people, the kind of nightmare you think you're immune to. But life has a cruel way of proving you wrong. My name is Carl, and what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story. It's the unraveling of everything I once held dear. Kiara, she was my everything. We weren't just in love, we were inseparable, or so I thought. I looked at her and saw my future, someone I could trust with my life, my dreams, my heart. We had built a life together that from the outside looked perfect. Friends would say we were the couple everyone envied, the ones who had it all. And for a long time, I believed it too. But there were signs, subtle at first, like tiny cracks in a once flawless mirror. I ignored them, convinced myself that they were just shadows of my own insecurities. After all, Kiara loved me. She was loyal, devoted. I knew this, didn't I? I had to believe it, because the alternative was unthinkable. Yet, here I am, about to recount the moment my entire world shattered. When the woman I had promised my life to turned out to be someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of betrayal so deep, it left me questioning everything. Everything I knew about love, about trust, about myself. I'm not here to tell you a story of simple heartbreak. No. What happened to me was far more destructive. It was the kind of betrayal that seeps into your bones, that tears apart the very fabric of your soul. I'm here to share this with you because I know there are others out there, others who feel that same gnawing fear, that same creeping suspicion that something isn't right. If you've ever looked into the eyes of the person you love and felt that chilling doubt, or if you've ever wondered what you would do if your entire life came crashing down in an instant, this story is for you. Because what happened to me can happen to anyone. And when it does, it leaves scars that never fully heal. So let me take you back to the beginning, to the life I thought I had, before the lies, before the deceit, before my world was turned upside down. Before I found myself here, questioning everything I once believed in. You know, when I think back to how it all started, it almost feels like a different life, like I was living in a dream. Kiara wasn't just the woman I loved. She was the woman I admired, the one who seemed to make everything in my life better just by being there. We had that kind of connection people write songs about, the kind where you look at each other and just know, this is it. This is what you've been searching for. From the moment we got serious, everything seemed to fall into place. We shared the same values, the same goals. Loyalty, trust, honesty. These weren't just words to us. They were the foundation of our relationship. I can't tell you how many times I'd look at Kiara and feel this overwhelming sense of gratitude, like I was the luckiest man alive. I'd found the one woman who was everything I ever wanted, and more. People used to say we were the perfect couple. They'd see us together and say things like, "You two are so lucky to have found each other," or "I hope I can find someone who makes me as happy as you two make each other." And I believed them. I believed that what we had was rare, special, something unbreakable. There were times when we'd sit together, talking about the future. We'd plan out our lives, dreaming of the family we'd build, the adventures we'd have, and the happiness we'd share until the end of our days. I'd look at her and see my forever. How could I not? She was everything I had ever hoped for in a partner. Loyal, loving, trustworthy. I remember telling my friends, "Kiara's different. She's one of the good ones. I don't have to worry about anything with her." And I meant it. I genuinely believed that she was incapable of hurting me, of betraying the trust we had built. I believed in her so much that I ignored those little whispers of doubt, those tiny signs that maybe, just maybe, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. But those signs, they were easy to dismiss. A missed call here, a late night at work there. Who doesn't have those moments, right? I convinced myself that we were just going through the motions of life, dealing with the usual stresses that every couple faces. After all, we were in this together, and I knew she'd never do anything to hurt me. Looking back now, I see how naive I was, how blinded I was by my own belief in our perfect love. But at the time, that belief was everything to me. It was what kept me going, what made me push aside any doubts or fears. Because in my mind, Kiara was that loyal, lovely woman I'd always dreamed of being with. She was my safe haven, my rock, the person I could count on no matter what. And so I built this bubble around us, this protective shield of trust and love, where I truly believed nothing could go wrong. But that bubble, it was fragile, far more fragile than I ever realized. And it only took the smallest crack to shatter it completely. It's funny how the mind works, how it can convince you to see only what you want to see, to believe only what makes you feel safe. For the longest time, I lived in that comfort, trusting Kiara completely. But then there were those little moments, the ones that, in hindsight, seem so obvious, but at the time felt like nothing more than ripples on the surface of our life together. It started small, almost imperceptibly. Kiara began coming home later than usual. At first, I didn't think much of it. We all have those days when work runs late, when the demands of the job keep us from getting home at a reasonable hour. But it wasn't just once or twice. It became a pattern. Late nights at the office, unexplained meetings, vague reasons for why she couldn't make it home for dinner. I remember one evening in particular. I had cooked her favorite meal, something I knew she loved. I was excited to surprise her, to see that smile on her face when she walked through the door. But she never showed. I called her, and when she finally answered, there was something off in her voice. Distant, distracted. She told me she was working late again, but this time there was no apology, no hint of the excitement we used to share when reconnecting after a long day. That night, as I sat alone at the dinner table pushing food around my plate, the first seed of doubt was planted. I brushed it off, of course. I told myself I was overreacting, that I was just being paranoid. But that seed, it grew. Then came the phone calls. Kiara had always been open with her phone, leaving it lying around, never thinking twice about it. But suddenly, it was always with her, clutched in her hand, tucked away in her purse. She'd get a message and immediately turn the screen away, or she'd step out of the room to take a call. Again, I tried to ignore it, to chalk it up to work stress or some other benign reason. But every time I saw that screen light up, and every time she hurriedly put it away, the doubts grew stronger. There was a night when we were sitting on the couch, watching TV. I noticed she was texting someone, her face lit up by the glow of her phone. I glanced over, curious, but she quickly turned the phone upside down, breaking the moment. My heart sank, but I still said nothing. I couldn't bring myself to ask who she was talking to, because to do so would be to admit that something was wrong. And I wasn't ready for that. The real turning point came when she started to pull away physically. The intimacy we once shared, the easy closeness that had been a cornerstone of our relationship, began to fade. She was distant, distracted, and I felt it. The connection we had always prided ourselves on was fraying, and I didn't know how to fix it. Every time I reached out, she seemed to pull back further, and every time she pulled back, the doubts clawed a little deeper into my mind. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, questioning every little thing. Was I imagining this? Was I reading too much into it? Or was there really something going on? I'd catch myself watching her more closely, looking for signs, anything to either confirm or deny the fears that were gnawing at me. But the hardest part was the internal battle, the fight between wanting to believe in the woman I loved and the creeping suspicion that maybe, just maybe, I was being played for a fool. I kept telling myself that Kiara would never do this to me, that she loved me too much to betray my trust. But no matter how hard I tried to silence those doubts, they kept coming back, stronger and more insistent. And yet, I still couldn't bring myself to confront her. I couldn't bear the thought of what it would mean if my suspicions were right. So, I buried my doubts deep down, hoping that they were just that. Doubts, not reality. But deep down, I knew. I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. You always hear people say that the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how deeply it's buried. I never really understood what that meant until the day my world was torn apart by a simple knock on the door. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon. I was in the garage tinkering with some old tools, trying to keep my mind off the unease that had been gnawing at me for weeks. Kiara was out, supposedly running errands, though lately I had started questioning every reason she gave for leaving the house. I wasn't expecting company, so when I heard the doorbell, I figured it was just a delivery or a neighbor asking to borrow something. I wiped my hands on a rag, walked to the door, and opened it to find my neighbor Susan standing there. She had this look on her face, concerned, almost pitying. I remember thinking it was strange, but I brushed it off. "Hey, Susan," I said, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay?" She hesitated, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, her eyes darting around like she didn't want to be there. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and careful, as if she were trying to break something to me gently. "Carl, can we talk for a minute?" A chill ran down my spine. There was something in her tone, something that made my heart start to race. "Sure," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. We walked into the living room, and I offered her a seat. She declined, staying on her feet, wringing her hands together. That's when I knew, whatever she was about to say, it wasn't good. "Carl," she began, "I've been going back and forth about whether I should say anything, but I just couldn't keep quiet any longer. You need to know the truth." My mind was already spinning. What truth? What could she possibly have to tell me that would make her this uncomfortable? But then, she looked me in the eye, and what she said next knocked the wind out of me. "I've seen Kiara," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've seen her with another man." Time seemed to stop. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt like I was in a dream, like this couldn't possibly be happening. What? What do you mean?" I stammered, trying to make sense of it, trying to give her a way to explain this in a way that didn't mean what I feared it did. Susan took a deep breath, as if gathering the strength to continue. "A few weeks ago, I was at the grocery store, and I saw her. She was with a man, Carl. They were in the parking lot, and they kissed. I didn't want to believe it. I thought maybe I was mistaken, but then I saw them again, outside a coffee shop. And it wasn't just a friendly kiss. It was more than that. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, my mind reeling, as I tried to process what she was telling me. Kiara, the woman I loved, the woman I trusted more than anyone in the world, with another man. My first instinct was to deny it, to tell Susan she must have been mistaken. But the look on her face told me she was certain of what she had seen. I asked her for details, desperate for something, anything that would prove this wasn't true. But everything she said only made it worse. The places, the times, they all lined up with Kiara's late nights and unexplained absences. The picture Susan painted was one I couldn't deny, no matter how much I wanted to. As she spoke, a wave of nausea washed over me. My hands started to tremble, and I had to sit down to keep from collapsing. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be true. But the more Susan talked, the more undeniable it became. The doubts I had buried, the fears I had pushed aside, they all came crashing down on me at once. By the time Susan finished, I was numb. She looked at me, her eyes filled with sympathy, and said, "I'm so sorry, Carl. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I couldn't just let you go on without knowing." I barely remember how the conversation ended. I think I thanked her, or at least I tried to, but the words felt hollow. After she left, I sat there in silence, staring at the floor, trying to piece together the shattered remains of my world. The love of my life, the woman I thought I knew inside and out, had betrayed me. And the worst part? It wasn't just some wild suspicion in my head anymore. It was real. It was happening. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to confront her, how to even begin to process what I had just learned. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The bubble I had built around our life, the one I had so carefully protected, had been burst wide open, and there was no going back. After Susan left, it felt like the walls were closing in on me. My heart was pounding, my thoughts were racing, and every breath felt like I was dragging in shards of glass. I was drowning in a sea of emotions: anger, disbelief, sorrow, betrayal. It was as if the ground had been ripped out from under me, and I was free falling into an abyss I couldn't escape from. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to break down and cry all at the same time, but instead I just sat there, paralyzed by the weight of what I'd just learned. How could Kiara do this to me? To us? The questions kept coming, each one hitting harder than the last. Why? When? How long had it been going on? And more painfully, what did this other man have that I didn't? The self-doubt was suffocating. I started questioning everything: our relationship, our love, even my own worth. Was it something I did? Something I didn't do? Was I not enough for her? Had I missed the signs because I was too wrapped up in my own world? The thoughts twisted and turned, gnawing away at whatever shred of confidence I had left. Every memory of us together, every laugh, every kiss, every whispered promise felt tainted, like a cruel joke that everyone else was in on but me. I'd look around our home, at the photos on the wall, the mementos of our life together, and they all seemed to mock me. How could something that felt so real, so solid, have been nothing but a lie? Nights were the worst. The silence was unbearable, filled with the echoes of my own doubts and fears. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment we had shared, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. It was like being trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I started avoiding people, friends, family, even casual acquaintances. I couldn't bear the thought of anyone seeing me like this, broken and vulnerable. I felt ashamed, like I had failed in some fundamental way. I was supposed to protect our relationship, to be the strong one. And yet here I was, crumbling under the weight of Kiara's betrayal. But the anger was always there, simmering just beneath the surface. I was furious with Kiara for what she had done, for shattering the life we had built together. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, to make her feel the same pain she had inflicted on me. But at the same time, I was terrified. Terrified of what she might say, of the confirmation that she had chosen someone else over me. I'd find myself pacing the house, my mind spinning in 1,000 different directions. One moment, I'd be filled with resolve, determined to confront her and get the truth out in the open. The next, I'd be overwhelmed by fear and doubt, unsure if I could handle what that truth might be. The internal battle was relentless. I knew I couldn't go on like this, but I didn't know how to stop. I felt trapped, torn between the love I still had for Kiara and the pain of knowing she had betrayed me. It was like being on a roller coaster I couldn't get off, each twist and turn sending me deeper into despair. And through it all, there was the sickening realization that I might never know the full truth. That maybe, just maybe, Kiara would deny everything, or worse, tell me something so devastating that it would break me completely. The uncertainty was maddening, and it left me feeling utterly powerless. I knew I had to do something, anything, to get out of this hellish limbo. But every time I thought about confronting Kiara, about finally laying everything on the table, I felt like I was teetering on the edge of an abyss. One wrong move, one wrong word, and I could lose everything. The life we had built, the woman I still loved, even if I didn't recognize her anymore. The emotional turmoil was all-consuming, a relentless storm that threatened to tear me apart. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air, desperate for something to hold on to, something that would anchor me back to reality. But there was nothing, just the crushing weight of betrayal and the agonizing question of what to do next. The days leading up to the confrontation were agonizing. Every time I saw Kiara, every time she smiled at me or kissed me goodbye, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I couldn't stand it any longer. The pretending, the acting like everything was fine when my world was crumbling. I knew I had to confront her, to get the truth out in the open, no matter how much it hurt. The night I finally did, it was raining, the kind of rain that seems to soak through your skin and chill you to the bone. Kiara had just come home from work, drenched and shivering, but all I could focus on was the lie we were living. I watched her as she walked through the door, shaking off her umbrella, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands were clammy, and I felt like I might be sick. "Carl, you okay?" she asked, noticing the tension in my face. Her voice was so familiar, so warm, but it only fueled my anger. How could she act like everything was normal? How could she look at me with those eyes, so full of affection, when I knew what she'd been doing behind my back? "I know," I blurted out, the words coming out more forcefully than I intended. Her smile faded instantly, replaced by a look of confusion and then concern. "You know what?" she asked, her voice cautious, like she was stepping into a minefield. "Don't play games with me, Kiara," I snapped. "I know about him. I know about the affair." There it was, out in the open, hanging in the air between us. I could see the color drain from her face, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment she said nothing, just stared at me, like she was trying to decide how to respond. Carl, I don't know what you're talking about," she finally stammered. But her voice was shaky, uncertain. I had caught her off guard, and she was scrambling to recover. "Don't lie to me," I shouted, the anger I had been holding back for so long finally boiling over. "I know everything, Kiara. I know you've been seeing someone else sneaking around behind my back. Don't you dare lie to me now." She flinched at my words, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. "Carl, please. You have to understand. It's not what you think." "Not what I think," I cut her off, my voice rising. "What am I supposed to think, Kiara? That you've been late from work, hiding your phone, acting distant because what? You were planning a surprise party for me? Don't insult me. I deserve the truth." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But the pain she had caused me was too deep, too raw. I couldn't let her tears sway me. "I never meant for this to happen," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It was a mistake, Carl. I was confused, and I didn't know how to stop it. But it didn't mean anything. I swear." "A mistake?" I spat back, disbelief and fury surging through me. "How long, Kiara? How long have you been lying to me? How long have you been playing me for a fool?" She hesitated, and I could see the battle going on inside her, the urge to minimize, to downplay, and the realization that I wouldn't accept anything less than the full truth. 4 months, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was 4 months, but it's over now, I swear. It's been over since before we got married. I was scared, Carl, scared of what it meant, but I ended it. I chose you." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. 4 months, 4 months of lies, of betrayal, of her coming home to me, pretending like nothing was wrong. I couldn't breathe, the room spinning as the full weight of her confession crashed down on me. "You chose me," I echoed, my voice hollow. "You chose me, after you'd already destroyed everything we had. Do you really think that makes it better? Do you think that a race is what you did?" "I was lost," she cried, tears streaming down her face now. "I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know how to fix it. But I swear, Carl, it meant nothing. It was a mistake, and I've regretted it every day since." Regretted it? I was shaking. The anger and heartbreak too much to contain. "You didn't regret it enough to stop. You didn't regret it enough to tell me the truth. You just kept lying, hoping I'd never find out." "I was afraid," she sobbed. "I was afraid of losing you, of losing everything we had. I didn't want to hurt you, Carl, but I was weak. I'm so sorry, please. You have to believe me." Finally, I spoke, my voice cold, distant. "I need time," I said. "I need space to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do now. But right now, I can't even look at you." With that, I turned and walked out the door, the rain pouring down around me, mixing with the tears I couldn't hold back any longer. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. All I knew was that everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, was gone. After that night, everything changed. The confrontation had ripped open the wounds of betrayal, and now I was left to face the reality of what Kiara had done and what it meant for us. I spent days, maybe even weeks, in a state of numbness, just trying to make sense of it all. The life I thought I knew, the future I had planned, it all seemed to vanish in the blink of an eye, replaced by a painful, uncertain void. I found myself walking through our home, seeing everything with new eyes. The photos on the walls, the mementos of our life together, all of it felt like a lie. I couldn't escape the memories. Every corner of the house held some reminder of the love we once shared. And now each one was tainted, a painful echo of what had been lost. I couldn't look at Kiara without feeling the sting of her betrayal, couldn't hear her voice without remembering the lies she had told me. But it wasn't just the past that haunted me, it was the future. What now? What was I supposed to do? The thought of leaving, of walking away from the life we had built was terrifying. But so was the thought of staying, of trying to rebuild something that had been so thoroughly shattered. I had always believed that our love was unbreakable, that we were stronger than anything life could throw at us. But now I was faced with the harsh truth that even the strongest love can be destroyed by lies and betrayal. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, with no clear direction, no way of knowing which path to take. If I stayed, if I tried to forgive her, what would that look like? Could I ever really trust her again? Could I ever look at her without seeing the man she had been with, without feeling the pain of what she had done? I knew that if I stayed, it would be a long, difficult road, one filled with doubt, mistrust, and lingering resentment. I would be constantly questioning, constantly wondering if she was telling me the truth or if she was hiding something else. But if I left, if I walked away from everything we had built together, where would that leave me? Alone, starting over from scratch, carrying the weight of this betrayal with me wherever I went. I'd be giving up on the life we had dreamed of, on the future we had planned. And for what? To be alone, with nothing but my pain to keep me company. And then there was the guilt, the thought of leaving Kiara, of abandoning her when she was begging me to stay, when she was promising to do whatever it took to make things right. She was desperate, pleading with me to give her another chance, to let her prove that she could be the wife I thought she was. But could I? Could I find it in myself to forgive her, to move past what she had done and try to rebuild our life together? Every day, the questions kept piling up, each one more painful and more complicated than the last. There was no easy answer, no clear solution, just a never-ending loop of doubts and fears, pulling me in every direction at once. I started thinking about what staying with her would mean. It would mean living in this house, surrounded by memories, constantly reminded of what she did. It would mean trying to rebuild a trust that had been so thoroughly destroyed, wondering every day if I could ever truly believe her again. But it would also mean keeping the life we had built, the plans we had made, the dreams we had shared. It would mean trying to hold on to the love that still lingered, even after everything. But leaving would mean letting go of all of that. It would mean starting over, walking away from the life we had created together and trying to piece together a new one on my own. It would mean dealing with the pain, the loneliness, the uncertainty of a future I never wanted. But it would also mean freeing myself from the lies, from the constant doubt, from the shadow of her betrayal. I felt like I was being torn in two, pulled between the love I still felt for her and the anger that consumed me. Part of me wanted to stay, to try to make it work, to believe in the possibility of forgiveness and healing. But another part of me knew that I could never truly forget, never truly move on from what she had done. And that part of me wanted to leave, to walk away and never look back. In the end, I knew that whatever choice I made, it would change everything. There was no going back, no undoing what had been done. I had to choose, either to stay and try to rebuild, or to leave and start over. But the longer I thought about it, the more impossible it seemed to decide. How do you choose between your heart and your mind, between the love you once had and the pain you can't escape? As I stood at that crossroads, staring down two paths that would lead me to two completely different futures, I realized that no matter which one I chose, I would be left with scars, scars that would never fully heal, reminders of the love that was lost and the betrayal that changed everything. In the aftermath of everything, I felt completely lost. The decision of whether to stay or leave weighed heavily on me, and I realized I couldn't carry this burden alone. I needed perspective, advice, something to help me make sense of the chaos in my mind. So I did what I hadn't done since the truth came out. I reached out to the people who knew me best. The first person I called was my oldest friend, Mike. We'd been through thick and thin together, and if anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was him. I remember sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white, trying to figure out how to even start the conversation. How do you tell someone that the life you thought you had is over, that the person you trusted most in the world betrayed you in the worst way possible? When Mike answered, his voice was the same steady, reassuring tone I'd heard 1,000 times before. But this time, I wasn't calling to catch up or to grab a beer. I was calling because I needed him, in a way I never had before. "Mike, I don't even know how to say this," I began, my voice trembling. "But Kiara, she cheated on me. I don't know what to do, man. I'm completely wrecked." There was a pause on the other end, and then I heard Mike let out a long, slow breath. "Carl, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice heavy with sympathy. "I can't even imagine what you're going through right now. But listen, whatever you decide to do, you don't have to do it alone. I'm here for you, no matter what." Hearing those words was like a lifeline. I told him everything, how I'd found out, the confrontation, the endless cycle of doubt and anger that had consumed me since. Mike listened quietly, not interrupting, just letting me get it all out. When I finally stopped, feeling drained and vulnerable, he spoke. "Look, Carl, I'm not going to tell you what to do," he said. "This is your life, and only you can decide what's right for you. But I will say this, whatever choice you make sure it's for you. Don't stay with her out of guilt, or because you're afraid of starting over. And don't leave just because you're angry and hurt right now. Think about what you really want and what you need to heal." His words hit me hard. I realized that in all my agony, I hadn't really considered what I wanted, what I needed to find peace, to move forward. I had been so focused on the betrayal, on the pain, that I hadn't taken a step back to figure out what would truly be best for me. But it wasn't just Mike I turned to. I also spoke to my parents, who had always been a source of wisdom and guidance in my life. They were heartbroken when I told them what had happened, devastated to see their son going through such pain. My mum, always the voice of reason, tried to offer comfort. "Carl, you need to take time to think this through," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Don't rush into any decisions. Give yourself the space to process everything. And remember, no matter what you decide, we'll support you. We just want you to be happy." My dad, a man of few words, simply said, "Whatever you do, son, make sure you can live with it. You have to be able to look yourself in the mirror every day and know you did what was right for you." Their advice echoed in my mind long after the conversations ended. They didn't push me in one direction or another, but they made it clear that this decision had to come from within me. It wasn't about what anyone else thought was right. It was about what would allow me to move forward, to heal, and to eventually find happiness again. I also sought out advice from a therapist. I knew I needed help processing everything, and talking to a professional gave me a new perspective. The therapist didn't have any magic answers, but she helped me explore my feelings, my fears, and my hopes for the future. She made me realize that I didn't have to have all the answers right away, that it was okay to take my time, to feel the pain, and to not rush into a decision I wasn't ready to make. One thing that stood out from those therapy sessions was the importance of self-care. I had been so consumed by Kiara's betrayal that I had neglected myself, my mental health, my well-being. The therapist encouraged me to focus on rebuilding myself, on finding things that brought me peace, even in the midst of the storm. As the days turned into weeks, the advice from my friends, family, and therapist began to settle in. I started to see that I didn't have to decide everything right away. I could take it one day at a time, focus on what I needed in the moment, and allow myself the grace to heal at my own pace. The support I received didn't make the pain go away, but it reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were people who cared about me and wanted to see me come out the other side stronger. It gave me the courage to face whatever was coming next, knowing that no matter what, I had a safety net of love and support beneath me. There comes a moment when everything changes, when the fog of confusion and despair lifts just enough for you to see a path forward. For me, that moment came on a day that started out like any other, a day when I was still lost in the cycle of pain and doubt, still unsure of what my future held. But by the time the sun set, everything had shifted. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was sitting alone in a park, a place I had often gone to clear my head over the past few weeks. The air was crisp, the kind of fall day that's just warm enough to remind you that summer isn't too far behind, but with a hint of the cold that's to come. I had been thinking, as I always did, about Kiara, about our life together, about the choice that still loomed over me like a dark cloud. But this time, something was different. As I watched the leaves falling from the trees, drifting gently to the ground, I felt a strange sense of clarity begin to settle in. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but more like a gradual realization, as if the pieces of a puzzle were finally starting to fit together. I had been so consumed by the betrayal, so fixated on the pain and the loss, that I hadn't allowed myself to see beyond it. But sitting there in that park, surrounded by the quiet beauty of nature, I started to see things differently. I started to think not just about what I had lost, but about what I still had, about who I was before Kiara, and who I could be after. For so long, my life had been defined by our relationship. Everything I did, every decision I made, was with her in mind. But now, for the first time in what felt like forever, I began to think about myself, about what I wanted, what I needed, what would make me happy. I realized that I had been holding on to the idea of our life together not because it was what I truly wanted, but because I was afraid of letting go. And that's when it hit me. The turning point. The moment when I knew, deep in my gut, what I had to do. It wasn't about revenge or making Kiara pay for what she had done. It wasn't about trying to salvage something that was already broken beyond repair. It was about finding peace within myself, about reclaiming my life, my identity, my future. I knew, sitting there in that park, that I couldn't stay with Kiara. The trust was gone, the bond we once shared irreparably damaged. And while a part of me would always love her, would always cherish the good times we had, I couldn't see a future where we could rebuild what had been destroyed. Staying with her would mean living in the shadow of her betrayal, constantly haunted by doubts and fears, never truly able to move forward. But leaving meant freedom. It meant a chance to start over, to build a new life, to rediscover who I was without her. It wouldn't be easy. In fact, I knew it would be one of the hardest things I'd ever have to do. But it was the right thing for me. It was the choice that would allow me to heal, to grow, to eventually find happiness again. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me as this realization settled in. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't paralyzed by indecision or overwhelmed by emotions. I knew what I had to do, and that knowledge brought with it a sense of peace, a sense of purpose. When I left the park that day, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The road ahead was still uncertain, still filled with challenges and heartbreak, but I knew I could face it. I knew I could take that first step toward reclaiming my life. That evening, I went home and sat down with Kiara. It was time to have the conversation I had been dreading, but also the one I knew was necessary. I told her everything: the confusion, the pain, the love that was still there, but no longer enough to keep us together. I told her that I couldn't stay, that I needed to move on, to find myself again. She cried, and I cried too. It was a moment filled with sadness, but also with a strange sense of closure. We both knew, deep down, that this was the end, but it was an ending that allowed for the possibility of new beginnings for both of us. As I packed my things and prepared to leave the home we had shared, I felt a mix of emotions: grief for what was lost, but also hope for what was to come. This was the turning point, the moment when I chose to take control of my life, to leave the past behind and step into an uncertain but promising future. As the months passed, I slowly began to find my footing again. The pain of Kiara's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer defined me. I had started to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and with each passing day, I grew a little stronger, a little more confident in who I was and where I was headed. But there was one thing I hadn't been ready to consider: opening my heart to someone new. It wasn't that I didn't believe in love anymore. It was just that the thought of trusting someone again seemed impossible. The wounds were still too fresh, the memories of what had happened with Kiara too vivid. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it, and that's exactly what happened when I met Brittany. We met through a mutual friend at a small gathering, nothing fancy, just a few people getting together for a barbecue. I wasn't looking for anything, wasn't expecting anything. I was just there to relax, to enjoy the company of friends. But when I met Brittany, something shifted. There was an ease about her, a warmth that drew me in. We started talking, and before I knew it, hours had passed. It was like we were old friends, catching up after years apart, even though we had just met. She was different from Kiara in so many ways: grounded, open, and honest. There was a simplicity to her that I found refreshing, a genuine kindness that put me at ease. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again. But with that hope came fear. Fear of being hurt again, of letting someone in, only to have my heart broken once more. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to take that risk. The walls I had built around my heart were high, and I wasn't sure I wanted to tear them down. But there was something about Brittany, something that made me want to try. We started seeing each other casually at first, grabbing coffee, going for walks, just talking. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other. She knew about my past, about what had happened with Kiara, and she was patient, understanding that I needed to move at my own pace. As the weeks turned into months, something unexpected began to happen. I started to trust her. It wasn't an all-at-once kind of thing. It was gradual, like the slow thawing of ice after a long winter. She never pushed me, never tried to rush things. She just let me be, giving me the space to heal, while also showing me that there was life beyond the pain I had endured. I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't expected, sharing pieces of myself that I thought were too damaged to be exposed, and in return, she did the same. We talked about our pasts, our fears, our dreams for the future. There was a vulnerability in those conversations that scared me, but also excited me. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, I was truly being seen. Not just for the man I had been, but for the man I was becoming. The more time I spent with Brittany, the more I realized that she wasn't just someone who could help me heal. She was someone I could see a future with. A future that wasn't defined by the scars of my past, but by the possibilities of what could be. She showed me that love didn't have to be about pain or betrayal, that it could be about trust, respect, and mutual care. There was a moment that stands out in my mind, a turning point in our relationship. We were sitting on a bench overlooking the river, the sun setting behind us, casting a warm, golden light across the water. We had been talking about nothing in particular, just enjoying the quiet, when she turned to me and said, "Carl, I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to rush you. But I want you to know that I'm here for you. Whatever that means, I'm not going anywhere." Her words hit me like a wave, gentle but powerful. In that moment, I realized that I was ready to let go of the past, ready to take a chance on love again. I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace, of contentment. That night, as I walked her home, I knew that this was the beginning of something new, a new chapter in my life, one that wasn't about running from the past, but about embracing the future. Brittany wasn't Kiara, and I wasn't the same man I had been before. We were both starting fresh, building something from the ground up, with honesty and trust as our foundation. This new chapter in my life wasn't perfect. No relationship ever is. We had our challenges, our ups and downs, but we faced them together, with open hearts and clear eyes. And through it all, I knew that I had made the right choice. I had chosen to move forward, to leave the pain of the past behind, and to embrace the possibility of new love. With Brittany, I found the strength to rebuild not just my life, but my heart. The most beautiful things come after the storm has passed. As I look back on everything I've been through, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the agonizing decisions, I realize just how far I've come. There was a time when I thought I'd never recover, when the pain felt like it would consume me whole. But now, standing on the other side of that storm, I see things more clearly. I see the lessons I've learned, the strength I've gained, and the hope that's carried me forward. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is the importance of trusting myself. When Kiara's betrayal first came to light, I doubted everything: my judgment, my worth, even my ability to move on. But through it all, I discovered that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. I learned to listen to my instincts, to trust that little voice inside me that knows what's right and what isn't. And perhaps most importantly, I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I made along the way. I realized that I'm only human, and it's okay to stumble, to feel pain, to take time to heal. Another lesson that stands out is the value of resilience. There were times when I didn't think I could go on, when the weight of the world seemed too heavy to bear. But I kept moving, one step at a time, and eventually I found my way out of the darkness. Resilience isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up, no matter how many times you're knocked down. It's about facing the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, and choosing to keep going, even when the path ahead is unclear. I also learned the power of forgiveness, not just for others, but for myself. Forgiving Kiara wasn't about condoning what she did. It was about letting go of the anger, the bitterness that was holding me back. It was about freeing myself from the grip of the past so I could focus on the future. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean finding peace within yourself, even when the scars remain. And then there's the lesson of love. Love isn't always easy, and it isn't always perfect. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes it hurts more than you think you can bear. But love is also powerful, healing, and transformative. With Brittany, I discovered a new kind of love, one that's built on trust, respect, and mutual support. I learned that it's possible to love again, even after your heart has been broken. And I learned that love, real love, is worth fighting for. But perhaps the most important lesson of all is this: life goes on. No matter how deep the pain, no matter how devastating the loss, life doesn't stop. It keeps moving, and so must we. There will be setbacks, there will be challenges, but there will also be new beginnings, new opportunities, and new reasons to hope. It's up to us to embrace those opportunities, to open ourselves up to the possibility of happiness, even when it feels out of reach. As I move forward with Brittany by my side, I carry these lessons with me. They've shaped me, changed me, and made me who I am today. I'm not the same man I was before, and that's okay. I've grown, I've learned, and I've come out stronger on the other side. As I bring this story to a close, I want to take a moment to thank you for joining me on this journey. Sharing my experience hasn't been easy, but it's something I felt compelled to do. Not just for myself, but for anyone out there who might be going through something similar. Life can be incredibly challenging, and sometimes it throws things at us that we never saw coming. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're stronger than we know, and we're never truly alone. If my story resonates with you, if you've faced betrayal, heartbreak, or even just the struggle of trying to move forward after a difficult time, I want you to know that you're not alone. We all have our battles, and it's okay to take the time you need to heal, to grieve, and to find your way again. It's okay to feel lost, to feel broken, and to reach out for help when you need it. And most importantly, it's okay to hope for something better, because better days are ahead. I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, your experiences, or even just how you're feeling after listening to this story. Please feel free to share in the comments below. I believe that by sharing our stories, we can create a community of support and understanding, where we can all learn from each other and grow stronger together. If you found this video helpful, or if you think it might help someone else who's going through a tough time, please consider giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with others. Lastly, remember that no matter where you are in your journey, you have the power to create your own future. It might not be easy, and it might not be what you expected, but it's yours to shape. Embrace the uncertainty, trust in your strength, and never stop believing in the possibility of happiness.